Hi, everyone. My name is Frank Marinko. I live in Melbourne. I'm an executive coach. And as Afaf mentioned, I've been working in this sphere since 1995, professionally since 2004. What I specialize in is transforming the context for people so that the circumstances can remain the same, the people in their life can remain the same, and the things that they're dealing with remain the same. But when they're able to shift the context of the way that they see those people and those things and the environment, their life shifts, and all of a sudden something becomes available for them that was never available for. So today I'm going to talk about critical thinking and the battle between narcissism and empathy, or egocentricity, as it's very well known in psychological circles. So the best thinkers always think about their own thinking. And critical thinking is this cognitive process that involves evaluating information and evidence to form reasoned judgments and make informed decisions. So it's an essential skill for success in both your personal and your professional life. And it allows individuals to approach problems with objectivity and open-mindedness. Now, one of the key benefits of critical thinking is that it diminishes egocentric behavior by promoting self-awareness, empathy, and a willingness to consider alternative perspectives. So there's a flow of critical thinking, and I'm going to demonstrate the flow on the PowerPoint presentation now. So whenever we're thinking from a purpose, and usually a why. And that purpose then determines the questions that we ask. And the questions that we ask then determines the information that we gather. And the information that we gather then affects our interpretations. And the interpretations that we make then affect the concepts that we use. And the concepts that we use in our thinking then affect the assumptions that we make. And the assumptions that we make then affect the implications of our assumptions, or the conclusions to our assumptions. So ultimately, the implications of our assumptions affects our point of view. So that's the flow of thinking. And it doesn't matter whether it's narcissistic or egocentric thinking, or it's empathic or rational thinking. So the flow of rationality or empathy goes like this. So the purpose of my empathic thinking is to develop one's own rational capacities and live life respecting the rights and needs of others. And so that purpose then impacts the question. So the question a rational person asks is, what is the best way for me to develop myself rationally and live a fulfilling and moral life? So the information that then I gather and the knowledge enables people to live and grow rationally. So the interpretations that one makes from a rational way of living is, empathic people make judicious judgments that enable them to live a rational life. And the concept then is living a life of continual self-improvement while respecting the rights and the needs of others. The assumptions that a rational person then makes is that it's possible and highly desirable to live a life of continual self-improvement and moral integrity. The implication of that assumption is that if I figure things out while respecting the rights and the needs of others, I will live a more happy, fulfilling, and productive life. So then the point of view that one derives from that implication is that life can be lived rationally or egocentrically, and the ideal of a rational life is realistic, practical, and powerful. So the essential idea that human rationality is fair-minded and self-developing, while irrationality, which is egocentrism or The extreme of egocentrism is narcissism, is selfish and self-validating. Now, as I'd mentioned before, it becomes obvious with the media that we use, the media that we see, the politicians that we deal with, the leaders who are in the limelight, that it seems as though egocentrism or narcissism is developing at a far greater rate than empathy in our communities. And we need to do something about it. So the logic of egocentrism or narcissism is again quite a logical flow. So those narcissists or egocentrics believe that their purpose is to gain selfish interests at the expense and rights and needs and desires of others, and to validate oneself. And so the narcissist or the egocentric believes, and they question, how can I get what I want and avoid having to change in any fundamental way? So the information that they gather is information and knowledge that would enable the user to get what they want without having to change in any fundamental way. And you often see this when authoritarian narcissists are faced with facts that are completely contrary to what they're saying. They will not acknowledge those facts. They keep on with their narrative, which they know is completely untrue, but it serves their selfish interests. So they interpret that the egocentric continually comes to the conclusion that serves or seems to serve their selfish advantage and self-validate them. Self-validation is very, very important for those who are narcissists or egocentrics. So the concept of egocentrism or narcissism is pursuing one's self-advantage and validating oneself. And the assumption that they use is, I should be so placed in the world that I get what I want without having to change in any fundamental way. And the implication of this is what might follow and what does follow when I behave in self-validating ways. And so their point of view is seeing myself at the center of the world and everything else as a means to get what I want. So instead of using intellectual standards of their thinking, the egocentric often use self-centered psychological standards to determine what to believe and what to reject. And there are some unbelievable ways that they believe. And when you question authoritarian narcissists, often the answers will be, well, I believe it because I believe it, or I believe it because we believe it, or I believe it because this is something I've always believed. But ultimately, I believe it because it's in my selfish best interests to believe it. So it's something that we've really got to be careful of, because on this spectrum of our human behavior, and one doesn't know whether it's circular or linear, and I've used a circular demonstration today, there's something about egocentricity and rationality and narcissism and empathy that is in all of us. And we've just got to be careful that if we, first of all, investigate ourselves, that we don't start turning on that spectrum towards irrationality or narcissism. So the behavioral spectrum of egocentricity versus empathy is really, really interesting. And I use egocentricity because narcissism is the extreme form of egocentricity. But as it's a spectrum, we'll often find that we do some egocentric things, which is all about the focus on us during the day. So I'm going to show you a model of that behavioral spectrum. So if we look at it being a continuum, a spectrum with empathy on one side of the spectrum and egocentrism on the other, and the extreme form of egocentrism is narcissism. And then we've got, in that middle way from egocentrism to narcissism, we start becoming rational towards empathy. And then as we leave being empathy and start moving towards egocentrism, we start having irrational behaviors. So some of the egocentric acts versus the empathic acts I'm going to show you on this spectrum. So one of the first things that egocentrics or narcissists display is grandiosity and self-importance. Yet on the other side of the spectrum, the empathic people show humility and modesty. Then the egocentric will have a lack of empathy or concern for others, but those with more empathic behaviors will have compassion and concern for others. So you can see that there are ways of balancing your egocentric tendencies. The egocentric or narcissist needs a constant admiration and attention. And you've noticed that those empathic servant-type leaders have the ability to give attention to others. They don't need the focus on themselves. Narcissists have very manipulative and exploitive behaviors, whereas empathics and rational people display an honesty and authenticity. And narcissists also have arrogance and entitled mentality, where empathic people seem to have the ability to be able to see things from other people's perspectives. Egocentrics or narcissists will often display aggressiveness or hostility in the face of even questioning, where empathics will demonstrate a kindness and a non-violent behavior. Narcissists show that they have an inability to accept criticism or feedback, whereas when you're with someone who's empathic and who is a servant leader, they're very open to constructive criticism and feedback. You notice that sense of superiority and entitlement in those dominant narcissist types. And yet, for, again, the people that take the focus off themselves and lead from being of service, really show respect of others and a sense of equality. So it's really important to note when we are looking at the whole spectrum of behaviors, empathy, egocentricity, rationality, irrationality, including narcissism as an extremity. They are all distinct characteristics, yet they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Each of us may exhibit different levels of each trait depending on the situation or context. Now, I do know people that may be highly empathic in their personal relationships, be absolutely loving and caring and doting. And it's as though something changes when they get to work and they demonstrate really narcissistic tendencies in their professional life. So you've got to be really, really careful when dealing with people that you're able to critically think things through and examine your thoughts, examine what you're going to say, critically examine what you're reading, and critically examine what others are saying so that you get a sense of having actually examined something properly rather than believing it because they believe it or believing it because you want to believe it. You believe it because you've critically thought it through. So there's some correction action and that you can counter egocentrism with, and I'm going to talk about a few of those today as to leave you with something so that you can check in on yourself and your actions. So unfortunately, as I said before, we see the world from inside out, a fact that leads everyone to be at least somewhat self-centered, and the technical term for that I've been using is egocentrism. So that myopic view of the world that is all about me. And I first received coaching in 1995 from my coach, and he was straightforward and to the point, and excused the scatological terms that Australians used, but he said, Frank, you're full of shit and your life doesn't work because the focus is on yourself. Take the focus off yourself and your life will work. So that dominating part of me was completely taken back that someone would offer me this extreme form of criticism. But when I had a look at it, everything that I'd planned was all about me. The goals that I wanted to achieve were all about me. I said that I loved someone, but that love was all about me. It was never about supporting them to achieve their dreams. So he introduced critical thinking to me, and that was the turning point with regards to my coaching and my life. I actually started being people-centric rather than being myopic and self-centered, and it has completely turned my life around compared with the life I had in those days. So knowing the dangers that I do of letting egocentrism get out of control and turning into narcissism, the question always has been, how can I or you engage in corrective action? So I've put up 5 points that I want you to dwell in, have a think about, and do some work about. So the first is, whether it's you that you're dealing with or a loved one that you're trying to help, here are the 5 pointers. So the first is, make an honest assessment of your egocentric behaviors or tendencies. So take stock of your behaviors caused by ordinary egocentrism that may be getting out of control. So it may be chronic lateness to meetings and Zoom meetings and meetings with appointments with clients, or poorly conceived Facebook posts that we've all done, that in a moment of anger or whatever it was, we've posted something or sent a text message and it's too late, it's gone, and we thought, gosh, that was all about me, and I don't think I even investigated what they were really saying. So decide whether you're letting your internal viewpoint skew your social interactions. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is, check out how other people feel. Put yourself in their shoes. Check out how they're feeling by putting yourself in their place in that situation, and use active empathic listening. You know, most people don't know how to actively listen. They don't know how to listen for what's being said and listen for what's not being said, and being able to paraphrase and being able to repeat important points, which really has people experience being heard. So start developing your empathic listening abilities, and you can broaden your perspective to see not just from the inside out, but from the outside in. Someone explained to me once what it was like to experience me coming into a meeting when I was upset, and everyone wanted to scurry out of the room because they said to me, have you any idea what it's like to be in a room when you walk in scowling? I hadn't thought about it because my world was all about me. But once I thought about the impact that it makes on people's ability to engage with you, you've really got to be careful about the behaviors that you bring into your meetings. The third point is, build up your inner sense of self. Now, don't let your self-definition become too dependent on receiving attention from others, because that's the trap. You either surround yourself with yes people, or you're always doing things that you're hoping for recognition or admiration for acceptance. Find ways to build your self-esteem by developing an internal set of standards that allow you to reward yourself for actual accomplishments. Now, the internal set of standards that I use is defining my word. So for me, what I reward myself against is what I say I will do, and do it. what I know to do and do it, what is expected of me and do that, what I stand for and do what I stand for, and then keeping the moral, ethical, and legal obligations of my group, and doing all of that on time. And the moment that I realize, the microscopic moment I realize I won't be doing that or doing that on time, I actually communicate with the impacted stakeholders, let them know that I won't be doing it or it's going to be late, and offer to clean up the mess that my broken promise has caused for them. Now, for me, that's been a momentous shift in my life where I realize that all I have is my word. And my word gives me workability. And with that workability gives me the opportunity set for high performance. The more I'm in sync with my word, the more workable I am and the more high performing that I am. And that's just in a sense of self. So no one else has to deal with, at times, your relationship with your word. Well, one of the things that I will invite you to do is next time you promise yourself that you're going to achieve something, post it on your refrigerator wall or post it on your office desk, because until it lives in the world as a declaration, it doesn't exist. It's just a pipe dream. So building up that inner sense of self is very important. Then squelch your imaginary audience. So I don't know if anyone can relate to the imaginary audience that even from childhood or adolescence, we've created in our own mind is so important. In childhood, it was always, I never looked right. I don't know about you. I wasn't tall enough. I wasn't good looking enough. My nose was too big. And I would imagine that everyone was making that judgment on me. And then as I got older, some of the things that really affected me was a pimple would occur on my face just at the time I wanted to date a girl. And I was thinking, oh my God, all she's going to see is that pimple. So these were the imaginary audiences that we create for ourselves that diminish our capacity to deal with ourselves. So it goes from that childish view that we have of the audience to the grown-up view we have of the audience until you get to about 60. And then one day you're going to realize that no one was actually thinking about you. It was all in your head. So you may feel that everyone's looking at you and judging you, but in reality, most people are just concerned about themselves as they are about you. So if you commit a social blunder, it's unlikely that it's going to get noticed or criticized as much as you think it is. So squelch that imaginary audience. They don't really exist. And then practice countering egocentrism. So test out your abilities to take on another's point of view by trying to explain a skill of yours to someone who's never attempted the task in question. I was doing that recently. I'd done some sales training with this group, and this person had never used a point of sale, EFTPOS machine, barcode reader. And I thought I could explain this really easily because I'd done it so many times. And yet to explain the difficulty involved and the precision involved in every move really, really took something. And I realized that I needed to actually prepare myself for something like that because there was so much that I took for granted, including reading over your emails before you send them to make sure you haven't skipped any details that only you know about, and including other people in your in-jokes with your friends rather than them feeling disenfranchised. So practice those things that counter your egocentrism. And then the most important thing, I'll just get back here, right? No matter where you are on the empathy, egocentrism dimension, you can pull yourself back towards your mindset that will allow you to see yourself as others truly see you. So once you do it, you'll find that you can live a more healthily, independently based on a more solid and internally based sense of self. So that's about all I've got to say on critical thinking and the flow of thinking. You're very, very welcome to send me emails or continue the conversation by email if you've got any questions. I'm also happy to take voice mails. I much prefer these days to listen to a message than I do having to read through it, because a lot of the times I lose the nuances in reading an email, but a voicemail I can easily get. So thank you for your attendance today, or thank you for having a look at this presentation on the link. And if you've got any questions, please send them to me. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to talk about something I'm passionate about, and I look forward to hearing some of your viewpoints now or at a later time.